Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's so wonderful to be here with all of you today. Welcome to our second day in the afternoon of our CFA Equity Conference, Waves of Resistance, Merging Waters as Pathways to Justice and Healing. Welcome to our session with speaker Tricia Hersey, author of Rest is Resistance and creator of the NAP Ministry. I am Talitha Maitland, the STEM librarian at CSU San Marcos. I'm a biracial Vietnamese and white cis woman in my early 40s. I have medium length dark hair with bangs. I've got a nice round face and I wear glasses. My pronouns are she and her. I'm going to get us through I'm going to begin our CFA practices at the beginning of all of our sessions, starting first with our land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we gather as the California Faculty Association on the traditional land of the California Indian people, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the people who have stewarded it throughout the generations. This calls us to commit to continuing to learn how to be better stewards of the land we inhabit as well. To recognize the land is an expression of gratitude and appreciation to those whose territory we reside on, and a way of honoring the indigenous people who have been living and working on the land from time immemorial. It is important to understand the long history that has brought us to reside on the land of the California Indian people, and to seek to understand our place within that history. Land acknowledgements do not exist in a past tense or historical context. Colonialism is a current ongoing process, and we need to build our mindfulness of our present participation. The California Indian people are very much a part of today's California, living and working and caring for the land as they always have done. Acknowledging the land is an important Indigenous protocol that we are honoring here today. And to find the native lands on which you reside, I invite you to visit the Native Land website. And I'm joining you here from San Marcos on the unceded land of the Luiseno Kayapawichem peoples. All right, next I'm going to lead us in a short community breath. And this is from the Rest is Resistance in the introduction. I thought it was really appropriate for our session today. So what I'm first going to invite people to do is to close your eyes if that feels appropriate to you, to feel the ground below your body and the sky above you, to feel length in your spine and your body in whatever way feels good for you. And I'm going to lead us through the introduction in the book. As you're taking some nice, slow, deep breaths, I want you to imagine a world without oppression. Take more time here. Visualize softness. Breathe deep. Envision a world centered in justice. Stay here. Let's continue to take a few more deep breaths in to the count of 4. Hold at the top and then let out to 4. And as we start to get ready to rejoin each other, take a couple of movements for whatever your body needs right now. Maybe you haven't been able to twist around a little bit in your chair all day. You've been sitting in equity sessions. Maybe you want to reach up to the sky, whatever you need to get your body moving in the way it needs. And then next, I'm going to read our interruption practice statement. Let me just get that up. As part of our continuing commitment to racial justice work, When we experience examples of racial narratives, racism, or whiteness in our meetings, or as we conduct our business, we will address it. This means we can interrupt the meeting and draw the issue to one another's attention. We will do this kindly, with care, and in good faith. Further, as we engage interruptions, we will take an intersectional approach, reflecting the fact that white supremacy and racism operate in tandem with interlocking systems of oppression, of colonialism, racial capitalism, class, cis heteropatriarchy, and ableism. This statement is a reminder that we commit to do this in the service of ending the system of racial oppression. And for the folks who are in the webinar, you have the Q&A option. You can, if you want to interrupt for any reason during this meeting, you can use the Q&A to do so. And then I believe next we have our logistics notes from Jamil.
All right, thank you, Talitha. Hello, everyone. My name is Jamil. I am the admin assistant for governance and operations, and I just have a little thing to share with y'all today. Thank you for coming, and welcome to Equity Conference 2024. So here's a few bits of helpful information for y'all today. To update your name, please update your name to reflect your full name, pronouns, and campus. Closed captioning and American Sign Language services are being provided today. And to turn on the closed captioning, you have to activate it by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen, then click Show Subtitle to view the captions. ASL interpreters will be spotlighted throughout the webinar. The chat and raise hand functions will be disabled, but the Q&A feature will be enabled. Please note that this session will be recorded and posted at a later date to our CFA YouTube page and Council for Racial and Social Justice webpage. The audience interaction portion of equity sessions will not be recorded. Also, if you want to check out our equity conference landing page, I'm going to put the link in the chat right now. And last but definitely not least is the book giveaway. So I'm going to drop into the chat again this link. Be one of the first 25 people to submit this form and get a free copy of Restless Resistance, a manifesto, hardcover. We will notify you by email if you're one of the lucky 25. And that's all for me.
Thanks so much, Jamil. And if you haven't read this book, you've got to get it. So submit there. And if you aren't one of the lucky 25, then still get your hands on a copy because it's so good. But finally, I want to introduce our speaker and give a brief overview of what the talk is going to be about. So welcome. We are so honored to be learning with Tricia Hersey. And the session today is Restless Resistance. Restless Resistance is a battle cry, a guidebook, a map for a movement, and a field guide for the sleep-deprived, searching for justice and longing to be liberated from the oppressive grip of grind culture with capital G and capital C. Hersey is going to talk to us about her book and philosophy, which is rooted in spiritual energy and centered in Black liberation, womanism, somatics, and Afrofuturism. Prepare for practical advice delivered in her lyrical voice and informed by her deep experience in theology, activism, and performance art. So without further ado, Tricia, I would like to hand it off to you.
All right. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much, Talitha. And I'm so honored to be here. I don't know about you, but it feels like today has just been kind of a hectic day. There's moments of being pulled into grind culture, moments of coming out, and just moments where we try to find space for ourselves. And so for today, what I really hope is that this is a slow, embodied, relaxing, slow energy. If you've been inside of different conferences and you've been to different classes today and you're working today and you had to get up this morning, get to work on time, like there's a lot of rushing and things that this culture keeps us always going and doing and being hectic. And my goal and my hope today is that this is a moment where we can spend time and just be in a space together where we can just hold space for silence and quiet and slowness, and we don't have to rush, and we don't have to think that there is some end game, that we're together really with the intention of holding space with each other. And the attempt is so important. I always tell people, they get so caught up in wanting to know, how do I rest? They even come to the nap ministry with so much anxiety around, so how do I do it? Please explain. And it's like, this is going to be a lifelong, beautiful, slow, meticulous love practice that is going to be subversive, pervasive. And for that, we give thanks. We give thanks, and we don't have to rush our healing. And so I'm just so grateful for this opportunity, for this moment, for this community, for art. I'm grateful for silence, for the alchemy of educators. Thank you for being an educator and for being a part of this rich community with the California Faculty Association. Thank you for thinking about liberation in your classrooms and in your daily life. I'm so grateful for anchors, for the idea of an anchor. I feel like rest to me is an anchor. It's a buoy. It boosts me up when my back is up against the wall. It holds me in a space of such closeness and swaddles me. I'm so grateful for dignity. And I'm grateful for the idea of what education can be for us. And for my entire life, education has helped to rearrange my life. I myself, taught in the public school systems, and then I went on to undergraduate, and I went on to get my master's, and I have a theology degree in graduate schools. And the professors and the faculty and the people in those spaces really were healing balms. There was so many who really were there because they really saw it as a calling on their lives. And for that, I am so grateful, because just like rest, education, and educators who are thinking about liberation, who see education as a calling, have helped to rearrange my life. And so I've been rearranging my life with rest since 2016, when I first launched the NAP ministry. I've been really taking the time to celebrate rest and the idea of community care. And so I want to just, let you guys know, give yourselves so much love today for coming and for being here and for just being curious. I'm just hopeful that people are just curious about the idea of rest, that this is an experimentation, and we don't have to get it right now, that we don't have to know everything and be everything, that we don't have to have this mapped out, that we really are just coming to this work and coming to this idea with curiosity, and being curious about the ways rest is a political refusal against capitalism, against white supremacy, against patriarchy, against ableism, and all these interconnected systems that are causing us so much harm every day. And so deep gratitude to the California Faculty Association for inviting me out and for trusting me truly to bring a word of care. I hope this to be a word of care. Like, if there's nothing else, that you leave after this moment, that you feel cared for, that you feel seen, that you feel unique, and that you understand that your individual story about how you're coming to the idea of liberation, how you're coming to freedom, is really important. I really love the theme of this conference this year: waves of resistance, merging waters, pathways to justice and healing. The idea of merging waters as this pathway, and how we can begin to continue to be a wave and to be in flow and to be aligned with the ways that justice is all around us. Liberation is always available to us. Rest is always available to us. Care, community is always available to us. And so rest is definitely a disruption and a pushback against toxic systems. That's what I hope my work to be. And so I want to just start right now and just have everyone continue on with this beautiful breathing moment that Talithia shared with us. Thank you so much. I want us to kind of set ourselves up to be able to just rest and close our eyes. I believe resting is a form that closing our eyes and daydreaming and silence is a form of rest. It's not just about naps, but quiet, silence, slowness, breathing, all of these beautiful forms of rest I am so grateful for. So I want to just, give you the opportunity to really understand that you can have rest. You can have all these times to just slow down. I want to share this screen because I want to show you some pictures of my grandmother, or if you've read the book, then you know so much about my grandma and this idea of a space to rest, that another world is possible. That's really, my work deepens into so many ideas. But today I really felt called, and felt spirit to say, what is the idea of it being another way possible? The idea of resistance, we always have to think about another way being possible. And so I want us to close our eyes, and I'm going to read a beautiful meditation from my book, from the chapter called Dreaming. I like to think of it as a lullaby. I like to think of the idea of reading these beautiful liberation texts with our eyes closed, so that through some form of, beautiful osmosis, through the form of listening, just the idea of listening to poems and listening to meditations and being silent and being grounded is definitely liberating, and is justice work. So close your eyes wherever you are. Feel free to have your screen off. Feel free to lay back, lay down. Rest is real life conversations. I don't know any other way to go. Rest is the roadmap, the guiding force, a truth teller. Rest is a meeting with self with a typed agenda. Rest is on your knees, whispering silently on the right side of your bed. Rest is lunchtime dreaming, the energy of the Rastafarian who showed me how to pray standing up, with my eyes open, hands stretched wide, because how will you see and know when prayers are answered? Rest is holy oil. From my head lightly connected on a silk pillow. Rest is holding us close. Rest is home. And continue to stay into this portal of rest. And I want to share a story about my grandma Aura. This is my grandma Aura Caston. She's an ancestor now. She was born in Vicksburg, Mississippi. And she is the muse of this work. She taught me how to rest when I was a young girl. And now that I look back on it, I'm understanding what she was doing. And so I want to name my maternal grandmother, Aura Caston, as the muse, because I never want to miss an opportunity to share her work and to speak her name, because the ancestors want to be spoken and they want their names to be uplifted. And they want to be seen as a guide for our lives and for right now. And she is the guide. And the story of my grandmother is that she was a refugee of Jim Crow terrorism in Mississippi. And like millions of other Black Americans during Jim Crow, and during the Great Migration, they fled the South. They left their homes for places up north and in the West. And so my grandmother told me that she had witnessed some violence, and that she knew that that would be the moment that she needed to leave. And so I like to say that my grandmother built a spaceship of uncertainty out of hope. And she had a address from my aunt, who also had lived in Chicago, who had made it up there maybe a couple months before. And she decided to jump on a bus, and she floated herself up to the south side of Chicago, where I'm from, raised 8 children. My mother is one of her 8, and raised dozens and dozens of grandchildren. I'm one of her many. And what she would do every day, once she landed in Chicago from Mississippi, thinking that there would be more hope, she will be away from the violence of terrorism of the KKK, that she will be able to build a new world for herself and her family. And she saw very quickly that it was still so many forces trying to crush her as a Black poor woman, coming to the city from the South side, from the South. And so she worked two jobs, deep poverty. She worked a job cleaning rooms at a psychiatric hospital. So she was like a CNA. And then she also cleaned homes for a family. And so I remember her in her white, she would always have on her white uniforms. I remember her coming, and I remember her sitting down on her yellow sofa in the living room. And in between her two jobs, she would sit every single day, take a break before she had to go clock into the next job. And she would sit on her couch no matter what was happening. If the children were running in and out of the house, if anything was going on, she would hold space for her rest. And she would sit with her eyes closed. And she would just have her eyes closed. And I always thought she was sleeping. And so me as the young girl would always try to hold space for that. I would tell my cousin, stop running in and out, be quiet. Grandma's asleep. Please quiet down. And every time, without even missing a beat, without even opening her eyes, she would say, I'm not sleeping. Every shut eye ain't sleep. I'm resting my eyes. I'm listening. I'm resting my eyes. I'm listening. And what were the downloads that she was receiving that allowed her to continue on, that allowed her to embody her own reclaiming of her time and her body in a culture and a space that wanted to see her working 24 hours a day, two jobs, and still could not hardly afford to pay the rent. But in that moment, she meditated and she said she was listening to God. Sometimes she would say, I'm listening to the universe. And many a time she would just say, I'm listening. There was no specific who, it was a listening. And so I would love for us to practice this resting my eyes practice, because it deepens into the idea of how we can reimagine rest for ourselves, that the culture is not going to give us rest, that we're going to have to be subversive and flexible and inventive and begin to reimagine rest in so many infinite ways. And for her, it was resting her eyes. And so I'm going to put on a bell. I'm going to hit this gong, and I want us to have that as our moment to understand we can close our eyes and intentionally rest our eyes in honor of my grandmother and in honor of the practice, because resting is going to be a lifelong practice. And so this is one practice that I always love to share with people and teach them. And so I'm going to hit on this, and then once you hear the bell, that is your moment to begin to rest your eyes. And then I'll wait and I'll bring you out of the portal for rest, and I'll ring it again, and you'll know that's the moment to come out. And so let's rest our eyes. You can stay in the portal of rest. Thank you for honoring that rest moment and for honoring the practice of resting your eyes. I want to take a moment, my work is really aligned deeply with community care. I very specifically don't talk about this work as being self-care. I understand and love self-care, but for this, our specific framework around rest is resistance, community care and rest are tied together. And so I want to have a community care moment and just tap in and ask you, have you had water today? Tea? A moment of silence? We just shared that together, so that will be a yes. Did you stretch? Have you seen the sky? Have you taken a deep breath? Do you have a blanket, a pillow, a favorite pillow? Are you comfortable right now? Can you hear my voice? This is an invitation. You can turn off your video. You can stretch out on the floor. You can lay back in your office chair. If there's a couch, a bed, you can daydream. You can just be. And I always want to uplift that there's infinite ways to rest. Resting is anything that slows you down enough that you can connect with your body and your mind. That's why meditation and that resting your eyes moment of listening that my grandmother did every day, 30 minutes to an hour. And I want to uplift that she was raising 8 children and tons of grandchildren, a huge family, the matriarch of a family, working 2 jobs, cooking and hosting. And there was space for her to rest because she crafted it. She demanded it. She held space for her rest. It did not matter if we were running in and out of the house, if something needed to be done. She sat on that couch and taught us that this was her time to rest, and everyone around had to honor it. And so I want to make sure I uplift that and have you guys really tap into the idea that to make space for your rest, you're going to have to craft it and invent it and be very clear and subversive and flexible about holding boundaries, about what it means to rest, about how long you should rest. 10 minutes, 5 minutes. My grandmother would do 30. Sometimes she would do an hour when she was really rushing. I've seen her rest her eyes for as short as 10, 15 minutes, but there was a moment for her to reclaim her body as her own. And so some points today to daydream and meditate on for today and forever really is that daydreaming and resting is key to our healing. That rest is a form of resistance in a culture like this, and our bodies become this site of liberation. That's why wherever our bodies are, we can find rest. We don't have to wait to save our money to go to a fancy retreat center. We don't have to have a passport to leave our homes. We don't have to have a fancy mattress. We don't have to have money to go to a spa. Our bodies, this divine body that we were gifted at birth, and why this work is a human rights, this work is about humanity and uplifts human rights, is that it looks at all bodies as brilliant, all bodies as possible, all bodies as divine. And because of that, it becomes our deepest site of liberation. And number 3, we must reimagine rest, like my grandmother, not just see it as a nap where you can lay down for 20 minutes and cover your blanket and close the door and no one is there, and that but that she reimagined it, and we can reimagine it to be so many things. In my book, I talk about a couple different examples of what resting can be. I name ballet and dancing and listening to music and prayer and walking as rest, and crocheting. My sister is a beautiful crochet and knitter as rest. But these moments when we can slow down and disconnect from the noise of our culture, and then we can reclaim our bodies as our own, is rest. Rest is always available to us. And then the fourth one for today, and always, is to think about imagination as the key to creating a liberated world. How we can imagine. I'm resting my eyes, my grandmother, or my favorite quote. And what it does is it uplifts the beauty of slowing down and the power of making space to rest. And how when we make space for our own selves to rest, when we honor our own boundaries and our own bodies, we make space for others to rest. We make it possible for others to see resting, and our community begins to see resting as not some frivolous thing that we add on once we're exhausted and burnt out. This frivolous thing that we see that we can add on once we're already on the edge, but that it becomes a foundation for everything, especially when you're working in education, and especially when you're working and thinking about your work from a lens of liberation always. Being inventive, imagining, being the one who can invent a way, being subversive like my ancestors, and thinking about the ways that this culture has tricked us and manipulated us to think that resting is something that is an afterthought, that is lazy, that is a luxury, that it's a privilege. It is none of those things. Resting is our human and divine right. The idea of healthy boundaries, and the idea of listening, like my grandmother, just listening to your body, listening to each other, listening to this beautiful divine body that wants to teach us so many things, but we ignore it. The culture teaches us to disconnect from it, to disembody. I'm tired, I'm sleepy, I don't feel well, but just keep burning the midnight oil. I'll rest when I'm dead. All of these violent things that the culture has taught us about this beautiful divine site of liberation that we've been gifted via birth. So I want to read, it's so amazing. Thank you guys for offering to have people to be able to get a copy of my book. It really means so much to me. And from my book, there's an excerpt where I talk about the idea of what it means to be more human. I keep talking about this work being work that uplifts humanity, that this is work around being more human. If I could distill this, what this work is, it's about taking us back to our natural state, our state of being human. And so I'm going to read a short passage from the book from page 26. This work is a battle cry for being sick and tired of capitalism and white supremacy, a resting place, an alternative and temporary space of joy and freedom. The way both systems view human bodies is evil and unsustainable. No one is being seen clearly within them, and instead we are viewed as less than human and a machine to be used, abused, and overlooked. This is a meditation on rest as resistance. This is a meditation on rest as reparations. This is a reverberation for my ancestors. May my deeds in this life please them. May the bass of drums shake liberation from trees. May you join us as we rest. Resting our bodies and minds is a form of reverence. And when we honor our bodies via rest, we are connecting to the deepest part of ourselves. We are freedom dreaming. We are freedom making. What stories are we holding deep inside that are untold and uncovered because we are too exhausted? This rest work is holding space for our memories, our micro histories, and all the things that make us human. The idea of rest as resistance can be challenging to distill in a few lines when I'm asked to do a quick take. It's counterintuitive to believe rest to not be a place to waste time, but instead a generative place of freedom and resistance. We have never learned this in this culture. The thought of not doing, even for a short time, is seen as lazy and unproductive. So an explanation of rest as a form of justice is layered and nuanced. And I have learned that one of the most concise and true ways to share this message is just to say, rest makes us more human. It brings us back to our humanness, to be more human, to be connected to who and what we truly are is at the heart of our rest movement. So this is like a moment during the talk here to kind of, begin to think about inquiry. And I know a lot of people love to journal with my book and also with the rest deck. And I really, education is so important for the work. At all of our rest events, either online or virtual, there's always moments that we deepen into the tenets of the rest work and we uplift all of the things that have like grounded this work. This work really comes out of a lens of liberation, Black liberation. It comes out of womanism and somatics and Afrofuturism, and it comes out of the idea of freedom and equality. And so these are some really beautiful questions I actually have been pondering, and I go back to probably for 7 years. Like I'll write them down and I'll have it in my journal, and then I'll come back to it a couple months or a year later, and then something will change. And so this idea of documenting, this idea of seeing rest as a lifelong practice, this meticulous practice, a love practice that is going to be continuous, that's going to change as we evolve, that's going to move as we move through navigating a system that really doesn't see us as true human beings and doesn't respect or see us as divine. And so because of that, resting, it wants to disrupt, it wants to push back, it wants to attempt to repair and to say, no, I know the truth. I know I've been manipulated. I know it is a lie, and I know that I am enough now. So these are some questions if you guys want to, if you're up. I know some people may be in their dream space, and I want you to stay there. But if anyone wants to deepen into some of the work later, these are some questions that I have actually found very helpful. They've helped me to remember how to be vulnerable and intimate. And they've been so tender for me as I'm moving through healing, because this work is really a healing work. It's uncovering what has been done to us and what has been told to us about our labor, about our bodies, about our worth. And then from that, we uncover the truth. And so first question is, how is your heart? That could be a question for the current, for presently, right now, in this moment. How is your heart? Or it also can be a question that has a little bit more liminal energy to it, where it's thinking about how is your heart in different moments? Or how will your heart be tomorrow? How was your heart when you were younger? How is your heart? Who are you being? That's the second question. If you want to write it down or just sit with it, if one of these questions holds something for you and it feels some type of curiosity and you feel like, that's interesting. What are you holding? The next question is, what story are you telling yourself? And then what is a more liberating story that you can tell? And I love these two questions, how they play on with each other here, because the first question, what story are you telling yourself? But then the second one assumes that you're probably telling a story that isn't liberating. And that assumption comes because of the culture that we have been born into. We've been born into a capitalist, white supremacist, patriarchal, ableist culture. And we're just assuming that based on that, I talk about in my book, like I name this brainwash and this manipulation starting from birth. And I talk about my birth story of having my son and how he was rushed out and how my birthing story was somewhat traumatic, and that once he landed on this side, that then I began to see how the systems are all at play. I name all the systems are in collaboration for us not to rest, for us not to see ourselves as whole, for us not to see each other and ourselves as divine, really worthy people who are worthy of life and who are worthy of care simply because we are alive. The systems instead teach us we need to do something to be able to get worth.
No.
And so, what's a more liberating story you can tell? And then the last two questions, how can you create rest for yourself and others? That's something that will change and that you may need to ponder. And then the last one, do you realize you don't have to earn rest? So those are those questions there. There's so much inquiry and questions that really help to ground the work. The book is full of questions, and I'm always, as an educator and as a person who loves inquiry and who loves to uncover, like, this work is experimentation. I know I'm being seen as the Nat Bishop and the person who created the framework, and I'm leading this rest movement via the Nat ministry. But in many ways, I feel myself to be a collaborator with the culture and also an experimenter. Like, this work is deeply experimental. It's something I experimented on my own body. I tell the story of how I began to experiment with this because I had to save my own life. The book opens up with rest saved my life. And the unsustainable pace that I was trying to keep up, it was just so unsustainable that I knew if I did not stop that it would be, lots of harm that I was doing to myself. And so this work was an attempt and is an attempt for me to reclaim who I am. And because of that, I wanted to share with others. But please know that it's an experimentation. There is no binary of right or wrong. There is no binary of this way or that way. It literally is a way for us to begin to tap into the energy and the language and the deep information that our bodies offer to us. But I believe that our bodies can only provide these answers to us in a rested state. In an exhausted state, in a rush state, in a state of burnout and sleep deprivation, we're just going to get more of the same. And so I see resting becoming the foundation for us to go into this portal, to receive information, to receive a download, to connect with our bodies. And if we believe that our bodies are our teacher, we believe that they have so much information to share with us about liberation, about freedom, about each other. They allow us to see ourselves clearly. Like I said, none of us are really being seen clearly because of these systems that have put these blinders over our eyes. And so to me, resting is a veil buster, removes the veils. It pushes back the veil a little bit and lets us peek around the corner to be like, that's interesting. I don't know if that's true about me anymore. I don't know if I need to live my life like that. I don't know if I have to want to keep feeling like this. I know that there's a better way that really roots ourselves in deep, deep care for each other. There's another inquiry that I love. I love this other question about how can we be more human when capitalism attempts to degrade our divinity by seeing our bodies as mere machines? And how do we reclaim our time? How do we slowly and intentionally begin to find these small and large and connected ways to reclaim our time? And Afrofuturism and science fiction is really a beautiful foundational piece for the ministry. I really love Octavia Butler, and I uplift her as another one of the muses of the work. And I would suggest and offer, if you're looking for some really beautiful work to escape into, to tap into, to feel held, and to understand that you're not being unreasonable because you want to live in a world that doesn't feel stifling, that doesn't feel toxic, that doesn't feel abusive, like you're not being unreasonable, that you are on path with wanting to see people feel with justice and wanting to have a more just and easier world, a soft place to land. The world and the culture is so hard. Things are so tough. It's so difficult in a lot of ways to just survive in this culture. But we want to be past survive. We want thriving. And so this book by Octavia Butler, I really love. It uplifts the idea of imagination in this another world is possible. Parable of the Sower. And in it, there's a young woman who discovers that she has these powers and that she begins to learn. And so this is a beautiful quote that I love. It's one of my favorites. And in it, she says, "I'm learning to fly, to levitate myself. No one is teaching me. I'm just learning on my own. Little by little, dream lesson by dream lesson." So much beauty in this piece. I want to definitely, at the end of, I want to make sure we have space for questions. I know that that's built into the program. And so I really want to open that up and that you begin to open your heart to the idea of this idea that no one is teaching me. I'm just learning on my own. It talks a lot about the innate qualities of us always. Our bodies know the way. Our bodies know that something is not right about the systems. They know that something is not right about the way we feel exhausted, the way we feel pushed, the way we feel sleep deprived, the way we feel rushed, the urgency that is created in this world. Our bodies know that something doesn't feel right. Something's a little off. And we begin to see that show and manifest in our bodies via disease, physical disease, our mental health. We're talking deeply about mental health and how sleep deprivation and this urgent culture really affects that. And, I have a degree in public health, and I'm really, really, really into neuroscience and really think about the idea of brain health and also about the idea of just body. And, from a really scientific lens, what we're doing to our bodies when we don't rest is really, we are robbing it. And there's so many studies that connect sleep deprivation to so much disease, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, all these things that begin to like break down our cells simply because we aren't getting enough rest. We're not getting full sleep. And so this idea of listening, our bodies are screaming and trying to share with us that this pace is too much. Our brains are saying the urgency, the anxiety, all of the things that are pushed on us is just too much. And so how do we find places to create these temporary spaces of joy and freedom? How do we find places to reimagine what resting can be? And so this quote is really beautiful to me. "I'm learning to fly, to levitate myself. No one is teaching me. I'm just learning on my own, little by little, dream lesson by dream lesson." So beautiful. To me, rest is a dream space. There's a dream space waiting for us. Resting is vulnerable, intimate communication. Rest feels like a heart massage. It's deep heart work. Rest is an anchor. Rest gives us dignity. Rest is spiritual work. I see our bodies as high technology. Our bodies know the way. Resting and connecting with our bodies helps us to remember that we are alive. I love this practice I learned in the somatics class that I was taking, where you rub your hands together. You try to get heat. So do that with me if you feel led to rub your hands together and get that heat, and then just press and just hold and put that heat and just begin to press it onto your body. Start on your heart. Sometimes I like to put it behind my neck, on the top of my head. Put my arm behind my back if you can. Just squeezing and touching and creating this heat to remember you are alive. You are aliveness. And because you are alive, you are granted deep divine rights. And one of those rights is to rest, to have leisure, to have care, to be seen as a human being and not as a machine that's here to simply be a tool of production for a capitalist system. Rest reminds me of life. It allows me to understand that we can transmute pain into joy, that our bodies are this vessel of deep imagination and deep technology for us. Here's one of a photo of me and some of the net ministers, my friends, resting outside in the grass here in Georgia and Atlanta, where I'm at. And I want to close out our time and slowly offer up some more energy. I told you at the beginning that I really wanted this to feel like a slow down moment. What an honor and how grateful we are to come together to share space with each other. And how unique and brilliant it is that we can stop in the middle of our day and sit with each other and have silence. I don't think we understand how important and radical it is. Like in a culture like this that wants to see us going and going, work 2 jobs, like my grandmother, work 3, do more, keep pushing, burn the midnight oil, keep going, push on, pull yourself up, don't stop, don't quit, you got this. Like all of these messages that don't offer space to be like, man, can I just take a breather? Can I sit back? Can I feel? Can I rest? Can I close my eyes? Can I breathe? So to be able to do that in community, as I'm looking on the participants list, 93 people are in here. What an honor, what a radical moment in time for us in the middle of the day to say we are going to intentionally rest together. And that's really what started this work. Outside of me experimenting with my own body and just resting on couches and not thinking this would be anything, except I was just trying to save my own life. I never thought it would be all of this. It would be a global movement, an organization. I would write books. I just knew that something didn't feel right and I couldn't keep up with the pace. And I couldn't keep up with the pace, and I knew that there was something else. And so as soon as I began to rest and slow down and take naps all over campus when I was at Emory University and in between cat naps, between classes at work, and find spaces to lay down outside, and instead of staying up late to do homework, I would just take a nap and hope for the best. And I got better grades because of that, because I was just embodying this moment of that. I am going to leap without a net, and I'm going to trust rest more than I trust the systems. I'm going to trust my body more than I trust the systems. And so how radical it is for us to come together and do this right now with each other, to hold space for some silence. And so I want to read the closing of my book because it really is, I would call it a sending forth. It is something to send you forth into the world. I made sure that it was the conclusion of the book. And so that the last thing that people will read when they listen to the book or they read it, that it will be this ending of sending forth this message that we are in this together, that you're not being unreasonable, that there's other in our community. We all feel this. It's not just you. There is something off about the pace, and it's just too much. It's unsustainable. And so this is why I started the ministry, because I wanted us to have community. I wanted us to understand and have a place where others felt the same way. I said, if I'm exhausted like this, and now that I'm resting, I'm feeling so much better, things change so quickly in my life, then there must be others who want to share with this. And that's why I began these small community rest events all over Atlanta. And we've done now hundreds and hundreds all over the country and all over the world. Last year we went to Australia and Amsterdam. This year I'm going to Poland and Brussels and all over the country. We've been holding these in-person collective rest events. We've done hundreds of also virtual events, and we've brought together, hundreds, and our memes have been shared by millions of people. And we brought together this idea of we're not alone in this. And so close your eyes as I read the conclusion, and I want to make space for us to have some questions. But I will leave you with a wish for our health and for our healing, with a wish for our resistance. Close your eyes and breathe deep. Let us send ourselves and each other's forth with this meditation. Go to your beds. Go to your couches. Find a hammock. Go into the portal of naps. Go there often. You don't have to wait on permission from dominant culture. Your body is divine and sovereign. Go to your spaces of rest, joy, and freedom. Create them in your imagination. Create them in your communities. Create them in your homes. Create them in your workspaces. Create them in your heart. Daydream collectively. Do all these things with others. We will not heal alone. We will not thrive alone. Communal care is our saving grace in our communion. Community care will save us. It is already saving us. There will not be instant answers to our inquiries about rest as resistance. We don't desire anything quick and instant because both ignore our complexities as human beings. We must be more human. We want to bathe and soak in our complexities. We want to take our sweet time. We want to tap into the bottomless well of wisdom and surprise waiting for us inside the portal of rest. There is power in nuance and expansiveness. Go to the water. Go to the depths of the ocean inside of you. Float there. Rest there. Imagine and dream there. It is game over for the lies of white supremacy and capitalism. We know better. The veils have been lifted, and with each nap, we are closer to seeing ourselves for who we truly are. We know that this will not be easy, as the systems will most likely gain more power before they ultimately burn themselves out. We are more than what we have ever been told, and we must continue seeing each other and ourselves no matter how distorted and exhausted we show up. Take to your beds. Accept all you have ignored and then rest more. What does your body want? What does your soul need? What are the whispers that have been silenced by the cranking gears of grind culture? What have we missed in our urgency and in our rushing? This is just the beginning, and for this truth, we must be grateful for the awareness, grateful for the information, and grateful for the reclaimed power and time. This is a transmission, a manifesto for the rest pilgrimage. Come back to it often. Keep it close. The messages will keep repeating. View it as evidence that you are not alone in your desire to be liberated from grind culture, to be liberated from exhaustion. Our battle cry and mantra, we will rest. Say it in your hearts. Whisper it aloud. Repeat it as you fall asleep. Tell your neighbor, we will rest. We will rest. We will rest. Thank you. I love to make space for questions, if anyone, or comments, or curiosities, discoveries.
Yeah, folks, go ahead and use the Q&A feature if you want to ask some questions. And Tricia, thank you so much for leading us through that. You're right, it felt so subversive to sit here in my office with my eyes closed. Well, everyone else was doing it too.
Yes, it's definitely good in the office, right?
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
in that building, right? I love that.
Okay,
So good.
let's see. Oh, and so someone wrote in a comment, says, this was beautiful. I was surprised by how much emotion welled up in moments of committed rest. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, emotion always. I was so surprised by that when I first started the work outside into the community. Like within me, I understood how emotional I was when I was experimenting with this on my own body. But when I began to share it in community, the first time I told someone about it, I hadn't even done one event, but somebody was like, what are you working on? What are you up to? I was like, well, I'm finishing school and I'm thinking about this idea around rest as resistance and thinking about doing a community thing with or resting and I just explained kind of some of the tenets and where I was coming from. And the person just started to cry. And I was like, are you okay? And I was like, she was like, I just got to chill. I just started to cry because I'm so tired. She was like, I'm so exhausted. Like, want a nap right now. She just was so moved by it. And so, Talitha, we've done so many events. And at every single event, there's tears. I've done hundreds. Wherever I go, there's someone feels emotional. This work taps into a deep space because it's work, it's care work. And when you're in a culture that you feel not cared for, to have care work and to be able to slow down and get into what your body really wants. And that's when the healing begins. And so I'm grateful for that. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, and then a question has come in from Anne, and I think it builds on one that I had also been thinking, so I'm going to ask for both of us.
Okay.
In your book, you write, I believe academia is the headquarters for grind culture, and it is a full circle moment that the energy and idea for the NAT ministry came to me while I was suffering from exhaustion in a graduate school program. So I wonder if you could expand on this and how can we as educators work against this for ourselves and for our students?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I was in graduate school and seminary at the Candler School of Theology at Emory University, full time. I started in 2013. Technology was available then, but they did not have any hybrid programs. There was nothing online. You had to get yourself down to that campus every single day. And I had a young child, 6 years old at the time, full time, 8 o'clock in the morning, all the way sometimes to 8 o'clock at night. I mean, if you look in the book, I have my schedule in the book about how I got up early and what I did. And when I look at that, I'm like, wow, how did I keep that up? Yeah, it got to a point where I was suffering from a lot of health stuff, migraines, inflammation. I was not resting at all. It just seemed normal. Like everyone in my classrooms was staying up. The library at Emory is open 24 hours. And so people were literally living there. They have showers in the basement. I have friends who had sleeping bags and they would literally be sleeping under tables. They would never leave. They would be working on papers for literally 15 hours sometimes. And so it just was a normal pace. It was like what was normal for everybody in my program. And I attempted to keep up with it for the first year. It's a 3-year program. And then slowly I saw my body breaking down and I just knew I couldn't do it. I just began at the same time. I think it's important that while I was in seminary, I was studying cultural trauma, like part of my thesis around my work as a Black liberation theologian. I was studying Black liberation theology, and I was studying cultural trauma and working in archives and looking at the pace that was happening to my ancestors' bodies. I was studying slavery and chattel slavery and looking at the South and as a site of all of these things. And so I was studying what was happening to my ancestors' bodies when they were enslaved on plantations, 20-hour work days. And I just became really obsessed with the histories and micro histories of the stories of them. Like, how was this possible that you could work a body and automate a body to the point of where it will work literally 20 hours a day, no breaks, no stopping, doing agriculture, picking cotton, picking tobacco, working in rice fields. And so it really moved me in a way, because at the same time I was reading about this trauma that was happening culturally during Jim Crow terrorism, during chattel slavery and the transatlantic slave trade. At the same time, I was feeling like as if I was having this deep trauma that I was placing my body through on just trying to keep up with living, of class, of trying to pay rent, of eating, of going, I worked a job at the student center, and I also had 2 internships that were part of the program where I worked at churches and I worked at a senior citizens home as a chaplain. And so it was like, is this literally really the schedule? Are you really assuming that a person can do this? That I can work at the student center, work 2 other internships and have a full schedule of 16, 18 hours of credits of classes? Like, it was just like, yeah, this is what it is. And then at the same time, they would be putting us through this, and then they will host like self-care days where there was like pizza. And I was like, that's all we're getting for our mental health and self-care days, some free pizza. No, you need to change the scheduling. This is not fitting for most people. And so I really uplift the professors who I went to and told them that I was exhausted and I didn't know if I can keep up, but I wanted to be in school and I loved their class, and that I needed to, is there something that could be done? And if there wasn't something that can be done, that's okay too. But I'm just letting you know, I am going to be late with some of my assignments, but I'm going to show up. I'll never not miss a day. I'm going to be here for attendance, but I'm going to be late with some things, like and most of my professors were very subversive with me. They were like, okay, like, I see that you're a very, engaged student. I know that you're, going to do good things in the world. So is there a way that we can reestablish the syllabus for you? Is there a way that you can get things in later? Is there something that could be done? And so I think I really love professors who would look at me as a human. I think past the policies, without, they also are working a job and have to protect themselves. So I didn't want them to push it to the point of where they were doing something that would like put them at harm. But there was a lot of professors who would let me sit in their offices in between classes where I would just cry. And they will be like, you can sit on the couch and get yourself together. You want some water? Who literally really saw me as a human and wanted to like collaborate with me on trying to finish the program. I had some teachers who would have classes and they would like have half the class and they would always have a rest moment in the class. When it was nice outside, we would have classes outside, and that would help me to be able to daydream and sky gaze and feel fresh air. And so I would offer that professors and people who are educators and working with students, that you really have a moment to see them as a human being, that you kind of become subversive and allow them to come to you and share with you what they're going through, and try to find spaces and moments in your own lesson plans and in your own syllabus that will allow for a little bit more space. That would, it doesn't have to be this fantastical thing like me where I start this whole organization, but just these small little moments of care in policies and ideas that listen to people and that allow time to be a little bit slower, that really allow us to be with each other and share in this collaborative journey of education.
I know that's such a concept, right? Seeing our students as humans, not
Mhm.
just students, especially in this higher education now, as it
Mhm.
is really just so focused on teach them so they can get a job, teach them so they can do this, so they have to get a job.
Right.
So making sure to see students beyond their just as future workers.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's why I named academia as grind culture headquarters, because of what you just said. They if to see someone as just a worker, then you're just a part of the empire. You're part of the machine. You're just training them so they can go off and become workers who are also exploited and abused at their jobs, working overtime, not getting paid enough, all of the things that capitalism provides, all the things that have to happen for that system to continue on. And so our work is to be subversive and to uplift it and illuminate it, and to begin to be more human, to have these just little small moments. That professor will let me sit on her couch and cry. That alone helped me. Like it probably was a small thing to her, but for me, I just think back, I've been out of school for a while now, and I just think back to Dr. Tricia Hersey Brown, who will be like, honey, whenever you want to sit on this couch, she had a beautiful couch in her office, come on in here, if it's my door is open. And so that really helped to ground me, to have a moment. So I appreciate her.
And we have a lot of questions. I'm going to combine some of them because I think we're getting at the same concept, really.
Okay.
So Corey asks, so thank you so much for sharing with us. I'm loving reading your book as part of my journey battling overwork and grind, but I'm having trouble finishing it because I keep being drawn to start over and reread. I'm personally confused with the concept of rest as not a privilege. Under capitalism and white supremacy systems, it seems like it is. Could
Yeah.
you discuss your conceptualization more?
Yeah, I totally understand why people would say it's a privilege. Absolutely. But I think to tap into that a little bit more is, I am coming from a space of a deep, being a liberationist, being a person who looks at liberation, who doesn't really see the systems as something that I attune to. Of course, I live here. I have to follow the laws and the order of the world, or there will be danger. But at the same time, I think spiritually, I think telepathically, psychologically, I don't believe that the systems in that way own my body, and I see my body as this divine dwelling place that and they can't have it. I see it. So it's a deep politics of refusal that I'm jumping into, that I'm really trying to get into, and to say that it is a privilege is to continue to buy into these lies, that to say that resting is a privilege when it's literally something that if you don't do, you will die. The same way with eating, the same way with people not having food in this culture, food justice, and, people being unhoused, like these ideas of deep justice movements, because I come from a justice lens. This work comes out of me being an activist and a community organizer since I was 15, 16, because I was raised by one. And so it comes out of a deep justice lens. And I think when you begin to see it out of a justice lens, out of a politics of refusal, it comes out of an idea of maroonish, thinking about my ancestors who were, if in the book I talk about the Maroons of North America, who these enslaved people who were jumping off slave ships, who were leaving plantations and going off into the woods, and they were not fugitives. They never claimed the idea of being a fugitive. They were simply have said to the system, I see what you're doing over there. You have this system of slavery, but I know that I am a human being and I say no to it. So, and I'm going to go off into this area and create my own world, this third space, this, talk about the Maroons. They were some of them who were living in the swamps in Virginia and in the deep forest of Georgia, and they were living for 15 years, not as fugitives, but they were having full own economies and lives and real culture. And the people who were still left behind on the plantations were helping them, but they were having their own, ideas of living. And so they deeply said no to a system and didn't allow what was happening, politically, what was happening as far as the laws of the land. They tapped into the divine power of who they were as human beings. I know this, but no. So the politics of refusal is what I lean into as a justice worker and as a liberationist. Yes, it seems like a privilege in a capitalist system, but all of those systems were created, and at the same time, all those systems can be torn down and they can be we can be flexible within them. And so, yes, capitalism, racism, anti-Blackness tells me I'm a Black woman who in a culture. I'm a descendant of enslaved people. My grandparents and great-grandparents were sharecroppers and then enslaved. I'm all of that, but at the same time, I still can say no to a system and say, you can't have me telepathically, spiritually. You can't have me. I'm going to still attempt. I'm still going to make an attempt to be free. I'm still going to push back and disrupt. So it's really about looking at this work as just a disruption. It's just a disruption to say, hey, hello, hi, I see you here. I know what you're saying, but I say no to it. I refuse. And because of that, I believe that resting is not a privilege. It is not a luxury. It is a divine human right. And that's what I feel.
Thank you. Okay, we've got, I think, 2 more questions we'll be able to answer in about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
This one was asked anonymously, and I really appreciate the person for asking it because I have also thought about this as like a small fat person.
Mhm.
So the asker asks, as a fat person, I struggle so much with rest. Fat
Yeah.
people are often seen as inherently lazy, and academic grind culture doesn't create much space for honoring our bodies.
Yeah.
So often I feel as though I should be doing more with my fat body when what I really need to do is rest.
Mhm.
Connections does your work have with the fat liberation movement?
Oh, yeah, my work is centered. That's the second tenet of the work really centers this work in a disability justice lens, in a fat movement, in a lens of those who are outliers, like my grandmother being a very large, poor Black woman who was a refugee from Jim Crow terrorism, who left the South in the middle of the night and landed in Chicago, suffering from PTSD. And so absolutely. I think that because my work has the idea of body liberation and the idea of looking at the body as no matter what this body shows up as, a trans body, a fat body, a Black body, a poor body, anybody that shows up, I believe that all of our bodies that we've been granted with are this deep site of liberation. If we have it and we have this body, we can find rest and pleasure, and we have divine dignity because of that. And so a lot of people in the when I think about the idea of what a body can do and what the work, when you think about what capitalism wants to push a body to do. And so my research around enslavement and slavery and what they were doing to try to automate a body. They really were trying to experiment on Black bodies and Native bodies to see what they could do. How far could they push a body? Could they work it 20 hours? Could a woman have a baby in the fields while she's picking cotton in 100-degree heat? Could she have the baby, and then once the baby is out, the midwife can she immediately begin to continue picking cotton? Can a person pick 500 pounds of cotton in one day? And if they didn't, it will be deep terror that happened to their bodies. And so all of these things happen. And so when I look at this work being centered deeply in capitalism and looking at the history of capitalism and how capitalism was created on plantations and created around genocide and created around looking at a body as not a human being, absolutely it pulls back the lens to fat bodies, to every single body, because what the systems want is a body that is thin, is well, is upright, that can do what it needs to do. You know how hard it is to get disability if you hurt yourself at work, how hard it is to get any type of leave that's paid. I'm thinking about pregnant bodies when I was pregnant and how my job was like, if you don't come back to work, I know you not feeling well, but you only got 6 weeks. If you don't come back to work, you lose your job. And I lost my job. So it's like this culture does not care what it is. It's like it needs a body to be ready to go and do for it and produce for it. And so thank you for asking that question, because yes, I love to talk about it, because I love that the second tenet is what makes this work grounded in that, is that it looks at the somatics of body, and it looks at the body being the deepest place of liberation. That's why it doesn't matter who you are or where you are. If you have money, if you need, you can find liberation. When I think about my ancestors who literally had a body that they didn't even own, that it wasn't even theirs. They had no autonomy. They were enslaved. And they still said, no, It doesn't matter. I'm going to still be free. I'm going to go here and I'm going to try to escape. I'm going to get on the Underground Railroad. I'm going to create jazz. I'm going to create blues. I'm going to have babies. I'm going to find ways to find spirituality. And so I look to those people. I look to my ancestors, and I want others to look to the people who have been most terrorized and most traumatized by this culture. And it will be Black bodies, it will be Native bodies, it will be bodies that can't do it. Will, you know, I think about Harriet Tubman being disabled. You know, she had like a brain disorder that didn't allow, that she fell asleep. And thinking about once someone was hurt, they were tossed aside. Once their bodies couldn't, they were limping, they couldn't do something, they were tossed aside. And so yes, as a fat body, and coming from a family of people who are larger body people, and understanding who I am as a Black woman in this culture, it is radical to say no to a system that sees you as merely a machine. And so thank you for asking that. And I'm really could go on and on about that, but I'll stop.
Okay, the last question is from Dr. Sharon Elise. She asks, and one says, thank you for sharing the story about struggling through academia while working and parenting/mothering. That is my experience, and now grandmothering and working. How might a collective commitment to rest as resistance help us achieve a healthy work-life balance? Have you seen examples of people doing this successfully as a collective or community commitment?
Yeah, I have. You know, I'm here in Atlanta, and that's where I live. And there's a collective like co-op of childcare. Like I wouldn't have made it through school if I didn't have work with them. If I didn't have people being like, I will watch your child. You can trust me with your child. Like I have him. Like this work, we cannot do this work alone. That's why my work rests in community care. I talk about community care. I think I probably said it 50 times in the book. Like I just kept repeating it. I use repetition as a tactic in my book. So it's a manifesto. And so my book hopes, what a manifesto hopes to do traditionally is to bring about a new future, is to like write about something that has not existed, is to dream up a new world. And so I always talk about the idea of this work could have easily been just me resting on the couch and feeling like immediately when I started to like rest and just started to find ways to rest and just like kind of leaped without a net and was like, I don't care. Like I'm going to just see and I trust my body. I immediately saw so many beautiful things happening to me. Like my body started to feel better physically. I was a better mother. I began to make connections between what I was studying in school and what I was learning. And I just began to slow down. So I could have easily kept that to myself and just been like, oh my God, just Tricia, keep resting. But because I'm a womanist, because I'm a feminist, and because I'm a person of liberations, I understood that this has to be done in the collective. We have to begin to bring people together so they can experience it. And so the first thing I did to create the NAP ministry was start doing free collective rest events all over Atlanta. Sometimes 2 people would come, sometimes 40. The first one we ever did, 40 people came and they wouldn't wake up for 2 hours. And it was like this beautiful experimentation around collectively resting. And so the collective rest events, I talk about them in my book, are really what the work is. The work is laying people down collectively, building community with each other, around other people who are exhausted, around other people who are curious about this work. And so to go back to specifically about parenting, I think the idea of co-ops and collaboratives and finding people that you can trust and childcare work, you know, women and people who are parenting have always found ways to like share that work. It literally does take a village. And so I would have made it out of school without these people that I'm still friends with right now, who were like, I can watch your son. Sometimes I would be on campus and one of my friends who was in this co-op would be like, I'm gonna be on that side of campus. While you're in class, I'll take my son's name is Sahim. I'll get Sahim and take him to the cafeteria while you go and study. And so when I say that this work cannot be done alone, that we have to tap into these community spaces and really study community movements and study deep community work, I think because I was raised as a community organizer and activist, that it came very easy and quickly to me that I needed to do this with others, that we had to like come together. And so I just want people to really deepen into the idea of community. And community could be 2 people. It doesn't have to be hundreds. Community is where 1 or 2 or 3 are gathered. And that alone, to begin to build trust and energy around other people who feel the same, is really where the magic lies. Community care will save us. It's saving our lives.
Whew, I think that is the perfect thing to wrap up on. I wish we could have all day to kind of luxuriate in this and just really devote more time to it. But
Yeah.
I just want to thank you so much on behalf of the California Faculty Association. Thank you for this time and for getting us to slow down and be subversive together in this moment.